Hi folks, wanted to update you on our new M102 Gen 2 cannon. We made quite a few improvements since our last video, so we want to talk about all the changes we made. This is actually some of our original cannons. They're 5 years old. We've made all the upgrades to it. This one happens to be in camouflage that we camouflage for our farm, but you will receive one that is Desert Storm, one color, but real simple to camouflage if you so choose. So basically we have a 42 CFM air valve in there. It requires electricity and an air compressor. The bottom chamber on this cannon is your air tank, and basically we have a compressor so it pressurizes the tank, so every shot's taking place right on here. So like I said, it's a 42 CFM valve. We have timer in there that only opens the valve for 1/10 of a second, so approximately 4.2 CFM per shot. What you have to take into account though, customer does all the work, so it's a fairly fast fire, so you could be firing in essence of every 6 seconds. Everyone always asks, well, how big a compressor do I need? Basically what we find is the biggest single phase compressor you can buy, which is about a 26 CFM single phase compressor, does a fairly good job with 2 cannons. Anything over 2 cannons, you really need to go to a diesel compressor. Worst thing you can do is not have enough air pressure, so we highly recommend anything above 2 cannons go into a diesel compressor. All right, so a little bit about how our cannons work, for those of you who've never seen one of our cannons work. Basically it's pneumatic. Customer does all the work. So basically we have a trigger and we have a plunger. So each cannon has a safety switch built in. It also has a green LED light, lets you know when everything's ready to fire. Push that back to load, green light comes on, meaning the cannon's ready to fire. As soon as the lever goes forward, it opens the valve in the drop-in. And as soon as that's open, the green light's off. Open, cannon will not fire until it comes back and make contact with the safety switch. Works real nice. If somebody has a jam or something in there and that valve's open, you never have to worry about it being able to fire. It will not fire as long as that thing's open. So it has to come back and make contact. It is spring loaded, so every time you do it, it comes back automatically. You don't have to pull it back. Spring returns the lever every time. So basically what we tell the customer is, customer takes the apple, drops it in the feed tube, pushes the plunger, loads the apple, cannon's ready to fire. Aim, pull the trigger. That's all it takes. Real simple. Nice thing about it too, one of the major improvements we made in this past season, before every time you pulled the trigger, it would open the valve for 1/10 of a second. If you release the trigger, it would reset the timer and it would fire again. We've added some electronics to the system this year. Now, after you fire, the cannon is completely dead. You have to literally reload before you can fire. Now it's dead again. Have to reload before you can fire. What we find with the nice feature about this, 2 things. It cuts way down on air consumption. What we would find out is kids would be excited after they pulled the trigger. If they were out of apples or something, they might keep pulling the trigger. They could pull it 5 or 6 times. Every time they pulled the trigger, of course, it would fire, so it used a lot of air. So by this feature, kids will not take the time to push the plunger to refire. So we found that it really cut down on air consumption, and we heard that from a lot of our customers. We did some changes on some, who had the older generation. We updated them, and excellent feedback on air consumption and just the fact that kids can't continue to pull the trigger. So we figured that was a huge improvement. After adding that to the cannons this past season, really we find nothing more that we can do to this to improve on it. We have elevation stops on this. You can zoom in over here. We basically have elevation stop in the rear. We have an elevation stop in the front. That way you can limit for your location how high and how low the cannon goes. Benefit of this is we can tailor the cannon for your location. We have 300 feet plus woods behind, actually 500 feet with woods behind it. We can shoot as far as we want with no issues whatsoever. The new cannons also have side-to-side stops, so you can get about a 90-degree swing with your cannon. And you can also, we have bolts that actually narrow it up, so you can limit. If you don't want to turn it all, you can put the bolts in so it hardly moves at all. Or you can limit it to your exact location. You can turn it more one way and put stops in it so it can't come back as far. You can narrow it up so it goes the same direction both ways. It really helps detail it and make it a perfect fit for every location, because every scenario is a little bit different. Everyone asks, well, what's the pressure need to be for my location? It all depends on your setup, how far away your targets are. We're shooting at about 100 psi here. The valves have pop-off valves that limit the pressure to 125, so that's maximum that you can use. We see absolutely no reason to have anything that high. We're running 100 psi. That is more than enough air to shoot as far as we want. Our farthest targets out here are out there about 250 feet. That is more than enough to reach those targets. We have a lot of farms that back it down to 60 psi is all they're using. The nice thing about the bigger valve, you don't have to have as much pressure and you can still do an awful lot with it. So we highly recommend putting a regulator in line as close as you can to the cannon so that you can adjust the pressure on the go to where you want it to be. We also recommend a large air inlet. We're using 1-inch air lines coming all the way into the cannon. Talked to some farms, we've had some farms set theirs up. We're actually running about 700 feet from our compressor. We have a 500-gallon storage tank here, because what we do is we run a small compressor in the weekdays when we're not as busy. That 25 CFM I was talking to you about, it pressurizes a 500-gallon propane tank, so we have excess air in case we need a little bit of reserve. On the weekends we don't run that. We run a diesel compressor pumping about 700 feet, and it gives us all the air we need. If you're running a diesel compressor, I see absolutely no need for a reservoir tank. Possibly if you're running a smaller compressor, it wouldn't hurt just to help you on those peak times. Problem is, once that tank gets down, it doesn't really matter because that compressor has to kind of constantly pump to catch up. Only advantage of that is when you're using a shop compressor, you can pressurize that tank at 150 psi. You regulate it down out of that tank to 60 or 70, gives you a massive amount of storage capacity then. But either way you look at it, you do want large line feeding this. If you need to, you can run 1-inch line out to manifolds per se at your cannons. I've seen some farms actually reduce down to 5/8. 5/8 seems to do a very good job feeding it if it's a short distance, 20 feet or less. 5/8 will recover really quick. So it's all about how fast you can recover. When you take apples, you know, we've actually tried to see if we can run out of air. So basically you put one in, pull the trigger, put one in, pull the trigger. As fast as you can load it, it's recovering. So that's why it's so important. That's why it's so important to have big air, because as soon as you pull the trigger, you need that tank refilled on your cannon so that you can continue to shoot. Other features of this, extremely easy to clean. You know, 2 bolts, you can pop off this feed tube right here. You can oil up the slides. We recommend oiling the slides once a week. Probably it helps just with some penetrating oil or cable lube, just to help that piece of metal slide back and forth easy, because you will get some apple guts, pumpkin guts, whatever happens to be you're shooting in that slide mechanism. If you really want to do a detailed cleaning, there are 4 bolts. You can take off the slides that hold the plate tight to the barrel, and that allows everything to come apart completely. You can fully wash it with a pressure washer, warm soapy water, cleans it up really nice. You can put it back together. We never take ours apart for a thorough cleaning, just haven't had to do it. Again, when we take the feed tube off and lubricate the slide, it seems to do a good job. We did pressure wash these yesterday because it was the end of the season, just to get some of the apple guts and stuff out. But as far as taking them apart during the season, we never take them apart other than lubricating the slide. So that seems to do a really good job. We have front and rear sights. They're not highly accurate. They're more for looks than anything else. Again, the plunger, these cannons actually are bolted to the ground. They don't have to be. They're quite heavy. They're about 450 pounds. We actually bolt them down because we leave ours in place. We have vinyl covers for sale also that are form fit to meet these, so we can store them in the wintertime. Basically it covers the whole body except for the legs. That way everything stays right in place for the season when we're not in operation. Again, it takes 110 volt electricity. We do have ground faults in there, so if something were to trip, you know it's going to trip the ground fault. Voltage really is not an issue. You know, some people question if there's a voltage problem going to the customer, can get a shock. We have about 2 volts actually going to the trigger. So with the new electronics we added in there, there's virtually 0 volts whatsoever where a person can come in contact. So that part of it's real nice. You can run it off a generator if you want. We have a couple farms actually using 12 volt car batteries with an inverter up to 110 volt. They take a few amps to actually open and close that that air valve, so it doesn't take a lot of power to run them. But short of that, I think that covers everything I wanted to let you guys know. Feel free to give us a shout and shoot me an email. I'll be glad to talk to you more about it. Again, we ran these for about 5 years on our farm. Find it real interesting. Some people says, well, you know, what can I expect? Talked to several farms, and they say anywhere between 60 and 80 cents for every person that walks through the gate they make off having the cannons on their farm. So figure out what your attendance is on an annual basis and multiply it by 60 cents or 80 cents. Give you a fairly good idea what you might be able to return on your investment, and give you an idea how many cannons you may need for your operation. I think that varies depending on your location, what you need. We have 6 cannons at our farm. The biggest day we've ever had is 3,500 people at our farm. A lot of days we have 2,000 people. And even at 2,000 people, we have absolutely no problem keeping 6 cannons busy from that sweet spot from about noon to 4, and with a pretty good line. So appreciate you listening, and any questions, give me a shout. Thanks.